All right, today let's take a look at adding fractions with different denominators. So we are going to be on page 19 in your packet. Okay, look at page 19, and let's start with adding fractions with different denominators. It says, when adding fractions with different denominators, you must find a common denominator for both fractions. We can't add unless we have the same denominator. So our previous lesson, we learned once we have the common denominator, we add the numerators, and then, so like on this previous page, if we have a common denominator, we can add the numerators, 2 plus 4 is 6, and keep the denominator the same. Then we can simplify from there, divide by a common factor, and which in this case is 2. So 2 plus 4 is 6, 10 is our common denominator, it stays at 10. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and that is our answer. When we have different denominators, we have to find an equivalent fraction with a common denominator for both fractions, or sometimes just one. So here they give us the problem 3/5 plus 2/6. And in order to find a common denominator, we need to find what is common between a 5 and a 6. So we could use the least common multiple to find that, okay? So here's a hint. If we find the least common multiple between the numerator and denominator, that will create a common denominator. Then we can add. So if we take a look between a 5 and a 6, they did the like 5 times 2, 5 times 3, 5 times 4, 5 times 5, 5 times 6, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, 6 times 4, 6 times 5, and they found the common denominator to be 30. When we were practicing our common multiples, we took those two numbers, in this case it would be the 5 and the 6, and we skip counted by 5s, right? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. That's what they did here, right? But they just found both the numerator and denominator at the same time. And then for 6's, if we skip count or use your multiplication chart, 6, 12, 18, 24, and 30, we find that common multiple of 30. So we know that 30 is going to be our common multiple. Then we need to make sure that we turn each of them into 30s. They did that here, okay? But if we didn't find all of those equivalent fractions, we could just, right next to our numbers, put our 30 as our denominator and figure out what did we multiply 6 by to get the 30. Well, to get up to 30, we said 6 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we said 6 times 5 is 30, then we're going to multiply our numerator by 5. So 2 times 5 is equal to 10. That means 2/6 is equal to 10/30, which is also found here if we do all of the equivalent fractions up to that. Okay. For the top one, 5 times 6 would be 30. So then we multiply our numerator by 6 as well. 3 times 6 is 18. So now we have 18/30 plus 10/30. And you can see over here they set that up for us again. 18/30 plus 10/30 equals 28/30 because we add 18 plus 10. 18 plus 10 is 28, and we keep our common denominator. Okay, 18 plus 10 is 28. We keep our common denominator. Then we need to simplify. Remember, we talked about simplifying if we can. In this case, both numbers are even, so we can simplify by a common factor, right, of 2. And that gives us 14/15. Okay, so remember, to simplify, we're going to use, I'm going to write it here, use greatest common factor to find our simplest form. Okay. To find a common denominator, we're going to use the least common multiple and create a common denominator. Okay. So let's try a couple of these. Okay, we gotta find those common denominators between our numbers. So common denominator. I have a 4 and an 8. That is not the same. So let's check. Could I turn a 4 into an 8? That would be the easiest thing to do. And in this case, I can. I could say 4 times 2 is 8. Multiply that numerator also by 2 to find my equivalent fraction. 3 times 2 is 6. Now I have 6/8 and 1/8. So let's add that together. 6 plus 1 on my numerators is 7. My denominator stays the 8. 7/8. And in this case, 7 and 8, I can't simplify because they don't have anything in common other than a 1. Okay? Let's take a look at the next one. 1/3 plus 2/5. 1/3 plus 2/5. Well, they are not the same. So let's find what are our common multiples between 3 and 5. Let's find that least common multiple. Okay? Skip count by 3s. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. And let's count by 5s. 5, 10, 15. Now we have our common multiples as 15. That's our least. That means both denominators I'm going to turn into a 15. Okay? So we have 3 times what gets me the 15? Well, let's count. 3 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I multiply by 5 to get the 15, which means my numerator gets multiplied by 5. So 1 times 5 is 5. Same for the denominator. 5 times what is 15? 5 times 1, 2, 3. So 5 times 3 is 15. Multiply that numerator of 2 by 3. 2 times 3 is 6. Now I can add. Add my numerators. 5 plus 6 is 11. Keep my denominator of 15. And I know 11 is a prime number, which means its only factors are 1 and 11. I can't simplify this. So again, that's already simplest form. And I suppose I should have circled this one back here too. All right, let's take a look at number 3. Can I find a common denominator between a 4 and a 12? Well, could I turn a 4 into a 12 with multiplying? Yeah, I can make this a 12 if I multiply by 3. 4, 8, 12. 3 times. Multiply that numerator by 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. Now 3/4 is equivalent to 9/12. Because those are equal, I can now add 1/12 to 9/12. I get 10/12. Can I simplify this? Can I find a common factor to simplify? Well, they're both an even number. All even numbers can be divided by 2. So let's divide it by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 12 divided by 2 is 6. And now I have simplest form of 5/6. So 3/4 of a pie plus 1/12 of a pie is equal to 5/6 of a pie. Okay. Now, there is another strategy. Can you turn the page for me? And turn the page for me. Yep, to this page. It would be page 21 in your packet. And let's try another strategy. Adding fractions with different denominators. This is another shortcut. So what we did here was we found that common denominator between the both by finding the least common multiple. Another thing we can do to find a common denominator is to multiply the two denominators together. So sometimes we call this the butterfly method. Now, if you have ever learned this, I bet This is maybe the method you used to learn how to add fractions with different denominators. So it says, find the common denominator. Multiply the denominators. So we have 2/3 plus 1/4. 2/3 plus 1/4. And sometimes the problem would have been written horizontally. That makes our butterfly method easier, because if I multiply my denominators 3 times 4, I get 12, right? And then I'm going to find the equivalent numerators. So they're going to turn 2/3 into something twelfths. If we take 3 times 4 and I multiply it just by my other denominator, right? 3 times 4 gives me a 12. 2 then times that 4 gives me an 8. So 2/3 is equal to 8/12. 1/4, then I'm going to multiply by 3. So 4 times 3 is 12. That numerator, 1 times 3 is 3. So now I have 8/12 plus 3/12. And I can add. I have that common denominator. 8 plus 3 is 11. They show us that down here, right? 8 plus 3 is 11. And my common denominator of 12. Now, that was working it vertically. The butterfly method, we work horizontally. And if you recall the other, maybe a couple weeks ago, we worked on finding which fraction was greater, right, for equivalent. We compared the fractions. And we did that by cross multiplying, right? Well, the reason why that worked was because of the butterfly method. Because with the butterfly method, we can cross multiply 2 times 4, and we get an 8. Okay, 8 up on this side. We can cross multiply 1 times 3. Okay, and we're always multiplying when we cross and cross on the bottom. 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, so we did 1 times 3 over here. We did 2 times 4 up on this side. Then, because we're adding the fractions, I can add 8 plus 3 is 11. Okay, and we got what we did down here with the butterfly method. So it might be simpler for you when you're adding these fractions to cross multiply. Cross multiply, use the butterfly method. Okay, let's try one at the bottom. 3/4 plus 1/5. 3/4 plus 1/5. I am going to cross multiply. So, let me just zoom in here a little bit. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 5, I get 15. Cross multiply here. 1 times 4, I get 4, right? Multiply my bottom. 4 times 5 is my denominators to get a 20. Now I get to add the top. 15 plus 4 is 19. And that is simplest form of that adding problem for the fraction. Let's try another one. 2/5 plus 1/3. Let's rewrite it. 2/5 plus 1/3. Cross multiply. 2 times 3, right, is 6. Cross multiply. 5 times 1 is 5. Multiply my denominators. 5 times 3 is 15. So now my denominator is 15, and I add 6 plus 5, and I get 11. That's my answer. Let's try one more. 3/4 plus 2/8. Rewrite it horizontally. 3/4 plus 2/8. Cross multiply, like we were comparing fractions, right? 3 times 8 is 24. Cross multiply, 4 times 2 is 8. Multiply my denominators. 4 times 8 is 32. And what do I get when I add it together? 24 plus 8 is 32. My denominator is 32, which means my whole answer, 32 32, is equal to 1. What I would like you to do today is we skipped page 20. So I would like you to look back at page 20, and I would like you to try numbers on page 20. Oops, sorry, that didn't zoom. Page 20, I want you to do numbers 1, 2, and 3 on lined paper. And turn that in when you are finished. 1, 2, and 3.